Back to Market on Close. It's time for Overlooked Stocks. That means it's time for us to welcome in George Tsilis, our senior markets correspondent. Now, George, today we're looking at Travel and Leisure, which was formerly Wyndham Destinations. They hit a 3-year high after their earnings. You know, as I look at them, they actually closed down just slightly on the day. Can you break this one down for us?
Yeah, I mean, if you look, Marley, at what's going on with Travel and Leisure, you're right. This was the former Wyndham Destinations Resort, which was renamed back in 2021. And, overall, if you look at, cruise liners, hotels, discretionary spending on travel, these companies have done extremely well. And Travel and Leisure Corp has done that as well. I mean, the last year, the stock is up nearly 40%, besting also year to date, the S&P are more than double of 22%. So this is, a core vacation ownership and timeshare resort company. They also provide property management services. They also have other services like travel and membership, vacation exchange, travel clubs, and so forth. But they did report earnings yesterday, which were actually quite good. If you look at top-line sales, top-line sales came in around 3.5% higher than last year, $1.2 billion. But if you look at EPS, they missed by a penny, $1.65, but nonetheless, it's still higher by 8.5%. But the constituents of how they generated their sales and earnings are improving within the context of the overall top and bottom line, because they did denote that ownership revenue actually increased 6%. That was higher than total revenue. The other thing is they denoted volume per guest, in other words, spend per guest was higher by 7%, as well as this company has been very generous in terms of dividends and share buybacks. They did denote also in the quarter about $107 million in share buybacks relative to about $4 billion in total equity. But I did also look at their capital structure in terms of their ownership declaration in terms of available shares that are in the float. They've actually been reduced by about 20 million shares to 68 million in the last few years. So this is a company that's been buying back shares pretty aggressively, but also increasing its total sales in the mid-single digits, as well as its earnings in the mid to high single digits from that standpoint. But a few things to note is they always talk about how the remote worker is becoming a larger percent of their total volume growth. In fact, that's about 25% of their total volume. While at the same time, the length of stay has actually increased. So people seem to be traveling more, working on the road, but also staying a little bit longer, while at the same time they're paying a little bit more per stay for average services. That includes, of course, hospitality services and other travel services that the company offers.
And I wasn't familiar with this company before we discussed them today, so I looked them up, and I was surprised that they own Margaritaville, several of the Margaritaville restaurants.
Very much, yeah. So restaurants is part of their hospitality services. In fact, they have about 4,400 global properties in total in the United States. It's actually quite small. I was quite surprised at only 220 existing properties. So it's more of a global brand. But I think what's happening is there seems to be more penchant for service-related provisions from a consumer standpoint. I think the aspects of things like Airbnb, which are really tied towards some more fees and expenses, and also the home ownership rate right now is high, but it's still a very challenging environment for people to buy vacation homes. So maybe timeshare seems to be more flexible for those who are also able to travel and want to travel. But nonetheless, this is just a great example of a company in the past 2 years which is providing value and income. And right now, if you look at the dividend yield, around 2.24%, they're paying about 40% of their income in dividends, 20%, like I said, in the last few years, share buybacks, and effectively they continue to execute from a compound growth rate, and valuations seem to be very much in line with their 5-year averages as well. So this is just a great example of a company that is executing very well, for lack of a better word, in terms of their business strategy, operational efficiencies, but also the areas of the industry group and the hospitality, cruise lines, and so forth seem to be doing very well in this economic environment as well.
And it is really interesting to note, you brought up the timeshares, and that's a big bulk of their business, their vacation ownership segment. And as I was reading through the report, management attributed a lot of their positive outcome to the resilient demand in vacation ownership in that segment. Were you surprised to see that, just knowing that how people spend their money has changed and there's a lot of concern in the housing sector and home ownership? Was that surprising to you at all?
Yeah. Actually, it quite isn't, because I think if you consider, secondary properties right now, one, it's very expensive to secure one. So maybe at the end of the day, the timeshare model is working right now because of the fact that you're not necessarily committed for the full upfront costs and financing needs of the entire property. Plus, I think people are less are more resilient in terms of their abilities to travel now, especially work from remote places. And people don't want to be tied down effectively. And I think the aspect of interest rates have really constrained second home ownership. And that's my view of it. But I'm not necessarily surprised to see these businesses doing well because of the fact that they're providing services and, of course, rental properties and timeshare properties that maybe consumers really want to bypass the high fixed cost of securing just an individual vacation property, which you may not necessarily use and don't necessarily generate much yield from.
George, we appreciate you breaking all of that down for us for Travel and Leisure today.